iceberg is very much rewiring mobility to build a more inclusive, connected future there. Right, we now broaden our lens, ladies and gentlemen, and we move to public-private partnership case studies. And that's going to be across a number of global hubs, which of course are essential in delivering major mobility and urban projects. But what works and what doesn't? And what sort of structure needs to be in place for long-term success? Well, I can think of no better panel lineup to tackle this very subject. So let's welcome my panel. Do be seated, trying to align with your name. There we go, perfect. I think we are missing a... There we go, perfect. Right, as I mentioned, I can think of no better panel lineup to tackle this very subject. So I'm going to dive straight in, as there's always limited time on these sessions, sadly. But Your Excellency, Osman Mahomed, Minister of Land Transport for the Republic of Mauritius, first and foremost, so wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much for making the time to be here in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So I wanted to start with that national perspective, where PPPs very much sort of shape mobility, not just in cities, but also across entire countries as well. So give us an overview of exactly how Mauritius is very much embarking on this PPP journey as well within its land and transport sectors. Give us that overview.
Yes, good morning, and thank you for having me here this morning. Mauritius has a very long-standing PPP relationship, if I may call it this way, in the land transport sector. Most of the people used to travel by buses, I say long time ago. And then with the increasing vehicular fleet, this has been perhaps reduced today to 40%. 40% of the population travel by buses every day for their work and for their daily activities. And I can say that 4 out of 5 buses on the road, they are owned by the private sector. And government support them in many ways through subsidies to the tune of 3 billion rupees per year for them to be able to intervene for diesel subsidy, etc., for them to meet their increasing cost of labor, etc., for these services to work properly. Now, there is also a bus modernization program of 100 million rupees per year that accompanies the private sector to make sure that their bus fleet is up to date. Now, insofar as successful other type of PPP projects is concerned, there has been a successful one in Mauritius, and we call it the Victoria Urban Terminal. It is located where once upon a time, the main bus station in Mauritius, which is in Port Louis, the capital city, on several acres of land, prime land, was put at the disposal of the private sector because it was old and all over the place. And this has been successfully implemented into a multi-story building that now have at the ground floor a bus station, which still need to be modernized further, and we are working on this. It has shops, food stores, supermarkets, offices, and potentially residential flats as well. So this is a bookcase, and a solid example of where PPP project related to the transportation sector has worked. It has also a bridge that connects the bus station to the metro station in the capital city of Port Louis. So it really has changed the landscape there.
Yeah, really interesting to see that transformation and that successful model, as you mentioned, of a public-private partnership. We're going to be learning a bit about that a little bit later on, but I wanted to sort of take a look at these partner dynamics with Jeroen there, partner at Rebel Group, of course. So welcome and thank you for joining us. So when we do look at these dynamics, many of these private-public partnerships, they very much sort of look great on paper, but they fall apart when it comes to the implementation. So Is partnership the ultimate key to success, do you think? And what does it take to really build a proper partnership, do you think?
Thank you, Laura. And I think it's a great question because I think when we look at public-private partnership, there's so much effort and focus on the contractual relationship between the public and the private. Lots of lawyers, lots of contracting, lots of consultants, all focus on that first bit. And I think we like to focus on the third P, indeed, the partnership part. What does it take to build a true partnership? And in the beginning, it seems less tangible. It doesn't come out in a contract only. It takes more. And perhaps it sounds a bit philosophical, but it takes that trust to overcome difficulties. Because, as we heard earlier today, I don't think there's any complex public-private partnership that goes as planned. So what do you do when things go wrong or differently? And the more complex these PPP come, the more that will happen. There's no contract that can foresee all these things that will happen. And I would think, it's like if you're like going from A to C, and C is the end, what are you going to do at B when you can see that you might not make it? The behavior at that point is what defines success, because you're going to try and see who you can blame more than yourself, or you're going to try and find solutions together to come up with a solution. And I think, whilst it sounds a bit like fluffy and not so tangible, I think on the public side, where I come from as well, there's a lot we can do. Because what I've noticed working globally is that for ministers and for mayors, that beginning, the contracting, there's a lot of focus on it. Everybody's there. That's where the money is. That's where all the things are in place. But thinking about the governance structure along the period of your program, I think really can make a difference. How can you strengthen the government side such that it can act with the private side along the duration of the project and deal with changes that are inevitable together, but also with trust from the government and the stakeholders that they can act upon. And that's, well, easier said than done, but if you look at successful public-private partnerships, they typically have a pretty solid governance structure that allows them to act. I'll leave it at that one.
Really interesting, because I wanted to continue with these governance models for a moment. Over to Lord Marvin Rees, former Mayor of Bristol and a member of the House of Lords over in the UK as well. Wonderful to have you here. I've seen you've been doing some previous sessions as well, but obviously our focus is on public-private partnerships. But focusing in on these governance models, so these models only work when leaders get everyone together to share the same vision at the end of the day. And so you very much proven that, in fact, with your one city approach and also with City Leap. So when you were the mayor of Bristol, what sort of were the most effective ways to keep PPPs and long-term PPPs resilient?
So I'll talk about one city, but just on that previous point, by the way, if you've ever heard of the iceberg model of culture or understanding, it points to the fact that only a third of the iceberg is above the water. Actually, 2/3 of what makes it of any thing exists below the waterline, and people can't see it. What we see above the waterline is delivery and success or not, but what actually is happening below the waterline, which are the long-term relationships, the stability, the culture, the ability to deal with adversity, actually is what is really matters. So I think I'm really taken by what you just said. So in Bristol, we developed a one city approach, and it was based on my sense, my understanding, I might say, that a city is not determined by the actions and decisions of any single organization. Actually, there are many points of sovereignty in a city at any one time, and world-class public sector leadership is not about what you control, it's what you can influence. And so we wanted to try and bring all those decision-making points within Bristol into alignment. That was local government, criminal justice, health service, universities, private sector, faith organizations. Once we brought those into alignment, again, which was by convening and asking, rather than by commanding and telling, because we couldn't, we had an environment in which any inward investment would know they were coming into a place that was organized. And as a collection of local organizations, we wrote a city plan that focused on what we wanted to be by 2050. So we began to offer a lot more certainty, both in terms of what our city priorities would be, and for the environment any investor would be in, not just next year or in 2 years' time when the deals were signed, but in 10 years' time, as their place in the city began to grow. Now, into this context, we did a deal, and I just shared with the room just now, called Bristol City Leap, was about decarbonising our energy system. That deal was actually a £1 billion deal, yeah. But we signed it over a 20-year horizon. And it was our ability to bring our public assets together over 20 years, but also to point to the alignment with our universities. So again, this begins to transcend the electoral cycle. I'm no longer in office, but the deal is still in place. The One City plan is still in place. So it begins to offer a certainty that is worth money, right? And is an asset to any investment. So I mean, I'm happy to share more, but that's essentially it. We began to offer as much certainty as we could. And the last thing I'd say, by the way, on that, in writing that One City plan and developing that One City approach, we said to investors, and I explicitly had these conversations, if you come and invest in this city, you are now part of the group of organizations that shape the future reiterations of that one plan. So you are now an active citizen of Bristol, as it were.
Wow. I mean, £1 billion. I mean, that's incredible. And yeah, we're going to zoom into that a little bit later on as well, of course. But as you mentioned, vision, certainty, working together, this notion of sort of influence rather than command. Yeah, really interesting the way you formulated that. But moving back to His Excellency, I wanted to focus on the sort of operational and financial side of public-private partnerships for a moment. And I was wondering whether, initially, what potential, just in general, do you think Mauritius offers when it comes to land transport today within this segment?
Well, I think there are several potential areas of cooperation in the land transport sector. I will speak for my sector, but there could be more. If you take the metro system, for example, it works quite well. A lot of people travel by it every day. It is about 26 kilometers long now. Over 19 stations, and it has successfully commuted since its construction about 5 years ago, people to the towns, and therefore alleviating traffic jam to a large extent, and offering a lot of facilities to the people. Now, the plan is for this to move away, not to move away, but to be extended as the expansion plan of the company, Metro Express Limited, which is a government-owned company. It covers 5 towns at the moment, because historically, the train line used to go there. It's a very busy conurbation, so very densely populated. And it makes sense, still makes sense, 1 century later. Now, the logical step, insofar as expansion of this line is concerned, is to go to the airport, because this year we have a record number of tourists that came to Mauritius. So I think if that goes to the airport, it will be quite, how shall I say, quite successful. And this, from the airport to the center of the country, and goes to the capital city, and from the capital city can be extended to the north of the island as well, where there is a lot of traffic jam in the morning because there is no alternative mode of transportation except for cars and buses, and also to the highly touristic area. So this is one area of potential for private sector, locally or internationally, that could be interested to get into. Now, and then since decarbonization was mentioned just now, there's a lot of potential to power this metro system by solar photovoltaic panels as well, because Mauritius has a dire need of renewable energy to meet its objective insofar as commitments are concerned. I'm quite sure that the grid will facilitate integration from the private sector in its system. Now, I mentioned earlier about the urban terminals. I gave the example of Victoria urban terminals. There could be 2 more such terminals that could be offered for PPP basis. That is a second one in the capital city, and in a place called Immigration Square, and another one in Catrobon, one of the main towns in Mauritius. And there, over and above the potential shops, food stores, supermarkets, offices, bus stations on the ground, there could metro station nearby because it has to be connected, the two, can have residential flats as well. Okay, now, I was talking to Jeroen just now, and his area of specialization is cashless system payment. And he was telling me that he successfully implemented one in all over, okay, all over the place. This is a main project right now in the country, being spearheaded by my ministry. The fleet management system is the first one, and it has to be accompanied by a cashless ticketing system in place. Well, we are in the process of recruiting a consultant for this, but if PPP projects have successfully been done and working well in other countries, this area can be one of them as well.
There you go, live here on the stage. There could be a partnership. Absolutely incredible.
But then I have to discuss at my ministry, and then government will have to decide whether it will go on a PPP basis or a contractor. But if the model has worked well, John was explaining to me in great details how you can use your watch, your mobile phone, or your bank card to pay for your transport, for you to commute. I think this is one good area of cooperation because, you know, now we are talking about artificial intelligence. Yeah. If you don't have data, you cannot possibly have artificial intelligence. The gentleman from MIT yesterday explained in great details about this. And if people are paying by cash, you don't have any data. And you cannot formulate policies, you cannot formulate strategies, and you cannot know whether all the subsidies that you are dispensing are being used judiciously. So that is why the cashless ticketing system has become very important. And I think I've just learned, it's good that I came here, and I learned from you that in other countries it has been implemented under the PPP basis and it's working well. We'll have to see these case studies.
Well, this is why we're here, so everyone can connect and see how we can push through together. I mean, absolutely fantastic. But a really great overview. And as you said, you know, it's all about data. It's all about quality data today at the end of the day, isn't it? Right, Jeroen, over to you. I want to move from Mauritius to Manila now, because apparently that is one of the most successful PPP structures that you've actually worked on. So what were the sort of key lessons in building that structure? Is there a one-size-fits-all model? And what do you think we can really learn from each other, no matter the size of the city or the country?
Thank you. And this indeed is a most remarkable exchange of great ideas. So thank you also for picking it up so quickly. Everything you say will be recalled. No, so the Manila case is interesting for various reasons. I mean, one, it was a city that wanted a contactless ticketing system like we're used to in New York or London or anywhere else. And they were really at the beginning. It was still paper-based tickets, not much control, no data, 4 subway lines that needed to be outfitted with this new system. And the Secretary of Transportation told us there is interest from the private sector. And I was like, that's interesting, because in the good old days, like with the Oyster card or, well, anywhere in the United States, people, I mean, municipalities pay a lot of money to vendors for such systems. But they got us thinking, because the banks and the networks and others might be actually very interested if we are indeed using the tools that we already have, like your watch, your phone, or your bank cards. And whilst there is no copy-paste, I mean, we work in, I think at the moment I work in 25 different countries. There's not a copy-paste because the local situation is so specific. But we can cherry-pick. And in the case of Manila, we used all our knowledge from contractual settings to allow for that kind of alignment of private and public interest, to capture value if it would be there, because it was going to be run in a competitive tender. And the result was that the government was paid $25 million over the period of 10 years for the concession for the right to have their cards issued in transit, i.e. aligning the private interest of having more people on a bank account, because there are a lot of under and unbanked people in the Philippines, with a system that allows for paying for transit. It was delivered on time, within that budget, and I was not allowed to tell anyone internationally about this because the vendors were like, no, that's not going to be replicable. This is a very specific Manila situation. Now, the specific part of it is that there were two really competing banks, and that is not always the case. So that was unique. But the ability to make a contract that can capture value when it's there, to align the interest of private and public, but also to set up a team within the government that fosters that collaboration all the way through. So it was a very clear team on the public side that was managing the public-private partnership from the Manila government side. I think those are the two generic lessons learned.
Really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing. And it's so good to have these case studies of, what works, what doesn't. As you said, there's no one size that fits all. And it's just so great to sort of hear about your experiences, especially with so much, experience in all of this as well. That leads me back to Lord Marvin Rees. Let's talk about the 1 billion City Leap partnership again. And I wanted to talk about investor confidence. What do you think were the essential ingredients to sort of make this happen? What sort of narrative and structure was very much in place to make sure that, private investors weren't just comfortable, but, they were enthusiastic at the end of the day about committing? How did you make it work?
I think one of the things that really got it across the line was us offering 20 years of certainty. So when we bundled our assets together, and I actually launched it in Singapore when I first spoke about it, we ended up getting 180 expressions of interest from around the world, and we were overwhelmed by that. We didn't, because we were just trying it out. We didn't know it would be that popular, and it was a process that took 5 years for us to go through, which is another matter, by the way. The time and cost involved in local government getting deals done that would be bankable, but that was it. We're offering 20 years of certainty, first right of refusal to deploy technology and get the returns in the city. One of the things I would add in from a local government perspective as well, and we talked about the need for local government to understand the private sector, but obviously it goes without saying, private sector must understand local government, right? So what did I face as a mayor when I was doing this? When I started to talk about doing a deal with the private sector, my opposition parties, campaign groups, and journalists start talking about me selling the city. Right?
Wow.
So I have to have certainty as a mayor that I am going to lock in the social value from any deal. So go back to that thing, what's below the waterline in this iceberg of a deal? Below the waterline has to be trust and certainty. So I can say, we are doing a deal with the private sector, but there will be social benefits. It might be we measure them against the Global Sustainable Development Goals, for example. We're going to have local supply chains, local jobs. We're going to lift children out of poverty. We're going to deliver housing. We're going to deliver a more inclusive economy. And so amongst that certainty, and I had these conversations very explicitly on housing delivery as well, which we had to have the private sector. I know you need a return on your investment. We will make that part of the deal. You know I need social value. That has to be in the deal. So let's be really clear up front that is going to be central to this deal. So we don't end up 2 years down the line having a fight in the papers and everyone losing repetition. If we all know what we want and we lock it in early doors, then we can begin to move at some real pace to deliver. But that 20-year certainty and locking in the social value to that deal was absolutely essential to its success.
Sadly, we have a minute left, so I've got 30 seconds for each of you to tell us your key takeaway for our audience. What would you really like our audience to take away from our conversation just now? You have 30 seconds each.
I think one sentence that my predecessor has just mentioned, the social value in any deal, that is important. So because land transport is about sustainable development. It has the economic perspective, it has the environmental perspective, it has the social perspective. So the population has to find itself in this so that one and all benefits from it.
Thank you so much.
Partnership is about trust. And in Dutch we say, trust comes by foot and goes on a horse. So, well, while we're talking about contactless mobility, but it's an old saying apparently. But you got to keep working on that trust to make partnerships work.
You're going to have to explain that to us after we leave the stage. Perfect.
I'd just like to go a bit wider, if that's okay. I would, and I've talked to a few people about this, we can share stories of best practice, but as a mayor, I always, when I went, and myself, Yvonne, the mayor of Freetown, would often talk about this. As soon as someone tells me an example of best practice, my first question is, how much did it cost, right? So I can fill a book with best practice. We've got to get the deals done. I would like events like this, COP, New York Climate Week, London Climate Week, to be weeks in which we announce the deals that have got done. And if we target specific values of deals impacting specific numbers of people, and we identify the cities we're going to get ready to announce at those events, then we take a back step and we know what we need to do in the lead up to make sure that projects are brought forward and they're bankable, to make sure the providers of the technology and the solutions are lined up, and to make sure the right kind of finance is lined up so we can get those announced. We must not go through a future set of events where we make announcements and pledge commitments. It's about getting deals done. And I think events like this could really lock that in.
Completely agree. And that's why we're here, of course. 3 leading voices. We cannot thank you enough for your time and educating us all on all of your experiences and those brilliant case studies. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it from my panel. Thank you.